Oh my god. What is... Holy crap. That is incredible. You know what this feels like? This feels like it's not made for me. It feels like I'm a tourist visiting like something that's not mine, you know what I mean? Oh, it's gonna be the red light on. Oh no, that is cool. Oh, they got me. They got me. This is awesome. Why is there maker shit in here? You know what? I don't care. I don't give a shit, honestly. That's Revelations for you. Simultaneously the most mind-numbing and unfair, but also the coolest and most significant content that id Software has ever produced. Doom: The Dark Ages was definitely different from Eternal, but in general it was a very palatable and agreeable game that did not attempt to push any boundaries, so I wasn't expecting much from Revelations. I was wrong. This DLC feels like a celebration of all the most iconic mechanics from the franchise, while also featuring one of the most unfriendly learning curves from the lineage. Across my playthrough, I've experienced the full range of emotions, from disappointment, frustration, apathy, all the way to the choking and exasperating sense of barely holding on in a fight you have no right to win, only matched by Doom Eternal and Metal Hellsinger. Revelations is far from more of the same for the Dark Ages, for better or worse, and I will proceed to analyze and dissect everything that works and doesn't. The main and biggest change to the combat flow from the base game is right there on the screen. The shield is damaged and unusable after the first major level. In its place, a spear that has some similarities, but feels significantly different to use. It can deflect, but it can't block damage. It can break shields at good range, but the special relocation option is not as fast. The first problem is apparent once we list out the possible abilities of the respective options. The shield has a block input, a throw input, and a charge input that doesn't require an additional key, so we only need to have 2 keys bound to access everything the shield can do. The spear can slash, which deals some damage, deflects attacks, and breaks armor. It can meat hook onto enemies and nodes. It can ground slam to falter in an AoE. It can stab to deal good damage, superheat armor, and lock down teleporting enemies. And it can also be thrown, which also doesn't require an additional input. And on top of that, we also get the option to swap back to the shield after the second major level, so that's a total of 4 + 1 keys to operate just the new functionalities. That is a fair bit, and it's not so easy to find convenient bindings to accommodate all of it. I sincerely believe that figuring out a good key layout was the biggest obstacle for me to at all enjoying this campaign. Let's start off with the fact that, when I first started playing, there were just no keybinds by default. The question marks in the respective slots indicate my reaction to this information. You had to manually pick them to even complete the tutorial sections, but that's before you even fully know what the abilities are capable of, which means you don't know what key would be the most convenient. As I was playing through the last level, a patch was dropped, which added the default key bindings, but also reset absolutely all key bindings in the game to the default. Let's have a look at what they are, shall we? What key would you pick for the slash, the ability you use in order to deflect attacks? The action that was under mouse 2 for the shield. That's right, R and mouse 3 seems like the most logical choice. Now, what would you pick for the dash? The action that was bound to shift in Doom Eternal, because shift is usually sprint and makes you go faster, and so does the dash. Of course it's control, you sexy beast. Now what about the slam? The thing that makes you go down. When going down is usually control or C. I don't even know why I'm doing this bit because I already told you it's not control, it's fucking shift. Were these key bindings picked by a random number generator? I know this might sound like a small problem if you've already beaten Revelations and all of its content, The key bindings probably seem very obvious, and you know exactly what you want to be using, but it's not that obvious for the average player, especially if you start out with no baseline at all, like I did. But let's talk about how the spear actually affects the gameplay. The slash is the most basic ability, and it's an equivalent to both the parry and the shield throw. It deletes groups of fodder, destroys armor, and, well, parries attacks. The parry takes a lot of getting used to, because it actually has startup frames now that must be accounted for. The shield lets you parry essentially as soon as you press right click, but the spear effectively forces you to input earlier. The animation also takes a lot longer to play, meaning you get punished harder for missing a parry and significantly reduces the amount of attacks you can deflect in quick succession. And, of course, you can't block. You will feel very vulnerable when playing this DLC, especially until you've figured out your preferred key bindings. It's a nice change of pace, but does it work out mechanically? In many ways, the combat feels like an attempt to recreate the speed and ferocity of Doom Eternal, along with this signature ancient god spike in difficulty. Not only are the combat encounters more intense, but many of your abilities are back. The meat hook and double dash, along with a suite of moves from the spear, like the stab and slam, which require charges and feel like extensions of the frag grenades and blood punch. The intensity is there, but that also exposes some real flaws in the basic kit of the Dark Ages. The melee combo on the Barons requires you to start the slash essentially as soon as you see the animation, let alone recognize the attack if you want to deflect it properly. This is because the Baron was not designed to be fought with the spear. Your inability to block enemies also really exposes how fucking infuriatingly difficult it is to avoid some basic attacks, like the Revenant's homing skulls, or just how much damage you take from the long-range automatic fire that you now have no protection against. There's a new enemy called the Buzzsaw, and it's cool in concept. It's a mostly melee-based foe that can cover ground very quickly on its wheel and hides most of his body behind a sturdy shield. It would have been great if you could parry all of his attacks, but as it stands, those are a minority, and if he decides to ride up to you and do the slash, there is nothing you can do about it. The Komodo has a similar problem, but it wasn't so obvious in the base game, as now they put him in some tight arenas he was clearly not designed for. Sometimes he will just run up on you, turning himself into a gigantic hitbox while also spamming ranged projectiles, and, you guessed it, there's nothing you can do about it. Despite these words, the combat is improved in many ways as well, thanks to the spear. I do enjoy the wind-up frames on the parry, and they make the deflection feel more demanding. In the base game, the shield didn't really require you to learn the moves of your enemies, because there were so little mix-ups in their attack patterns, and the strikes were almost too intuitive. With the spear, I actually found myself having to learn and memorize what the enemies are doing, not unlike in a Souls game. The Cacodemons in the Dark Ages are among my most hated enemies, because of how annoying they are. They will very predictably put impenetrable shields in front of them and send out one after another for you to avoid. There was no reliable way to get through the barriers, and so this attack is just a huge waste of time. And once you did manage to get close to attack, they had these melee bites, which were blockable, but not parryable, and so Cacodemons were extremely frustrating to deal with. Well, one of the upgrades on your spear lets you throw them and break right through all the pesky shields, while also dealing massive damage. This feels like it should have been in the base game, for how much it livens up the combat. The meat hook I thought was banking on cheap points for being like Eternal, but it starts feeling really goddamn necessary when so many of the new enemies constantly teleport out of your range. Like I said, the intensity of the combat has increased yet again, and I welcome this change in principle. Something felt missing in the base game, and I never felt that sense of hanging on by the skin of my teeth to pull through a battle I really had no business winning. Revelations goes right back to the difficulty of the ancient gods, for better or worse. Some of these encounters feel like they were done by someone who wasn't playtesting it themselves. A Cyberdemon and an Agadon in this fairly tight arena? That's too much, even for the basic shield, let alone the less reliable spear. Each of these enemies has been designed to be very annoying if you're not focusing on them, so you're eating shit regardless of which one you attack first. They've added other new enemies as well, like the Archvile. Again. Much like Eternal, there's nothing he can't do. Summoning enemies, bringing up shields, direct attacks, flurry attacks, AoE attacks, teleporting away as soon as you get close, and a health pool that rivals my hatred for this enemy. He just doesn't have a weakness. Overall, once you get a handle of the new abilities, the new combat flow will fall into place, but it took me a very long time, after completing the main storyline and all the further optional content. I can say that the DLC did not become fun at all until the second to last level, and I did not find it a significant improvement until after I finished mopping up the first post-game level. That is just too late. The technical barrier to entry is too high, and maybe the game doesn't teach you well enough how to use the new abilities beyond the basic tutorials. You might be saying, if the spear is problematic in some moments, why not swap between that and the shield, since you get it back after Hell's Core? Well, the problem is that I had to force myself to use the spear to get used to it in the first place. I knew that if I gave myself this freedom, I'd never interact with the new content and abilities and stick to what was familiar. Now let's get into some more positive aspects of the DLC, because there are things I have a lot of good to say about. For one, I am very pleased to say the music has taken a big step up from the base game. The new tracks feel a lot more experimental and have far more character. They use a bit more unorthodox sounds, and each of the melodies feels like it has a purpose. After completing each level, I still had the music playing in my head afterwards, which means they were both catchy and memorable. For the base game, this was only the case for one level. There's also a lot more overt references to older tracks. I caught a Sign of Evil in the second level, and an At Doom's Gate in the final boss fight. It felt to me as if finishing move had essentially no knowledge as to what Doom music used to be like when working on the Dark Ages, but for the DLC, did actually go back and study some of it to produce something closer to what fans were expecting. It still doesn't reach the heights of Mick Gordon, but I found I prefer it to the Ancient Gods soundtrack, and I think that's a pretty high praise. It feels surreal to be saying this, but the story has taken a massive step up as well. While I couldn't care less for the locales we visit, and the weird origin story sections shoehorned into this campaign, there are so many significant events that take place in the Revelations that have a massive bearing on what came after. My biggest gripe with the story of the Dark Ages was that it was entirely inconsequential to the events of the later games. If it just hadn't existed, nothing would have been different. Well, the DLC course corrects massively, and the amount of significant events we witness is mind-boggling. We witness the death of Valen's son, who later goes on to become the Icon of Sin, and find he was killed by none other than Doomguy, and also discover the significance of the Blue Dagger from Eternal. We see the start of the Sentinel Civil War, and also the descent of the Khan into evil. Even though I don't care for the design of the Praetor suit from Doom 4, seeing it being slowly forged, along with showing why it's got a red light, and the slow realization that this figure is the Wretch, is just awesome. The characters even become actual characters with goals and personalities, which feels like an unreal thing to be praising a Doom game for, but having King Novik actually swing his weapon at the Khan Maker in defiance is the kind of moment every good story should have. Characters cannot be merely exposition dumps and convenient deus ex machinas, but more like independently thinking actors with internal lives and ambitions. Sure, the events depicted often lack any sense whatsoever. I mean, what exactly did Doomguy think was going to happen when he strolled into the council chamber? Or why is there even a portal out of purgatory, and why does it take him to Argent Noor? I thought the ending was a letdown too. Sure, we've killed the henchman, but what does that accomplish? How is the world any different after completing this final level from what it was like before entering it in the first place? The story is not perfect, but I can see they really tried to create something special, and that alone deserves commendation. I think I might even go as far as saying I prefer this story to that of Eternals now. The main thing I didn't really like is how there's a few of these weird 2-minute flashback scenes. The scarily realistic setting is clashed with the goofy remake of the original shotgun and how fast you are. I first thought there were going to be representations of the old levels wrapped in a new layer of context, but they are just random little insertions that have nothing to do with any of the currently existent Doom games, and just feels very irrelevant, especially since you're not even fighting demons, you're killing human beings. The progression, for the most part, feels very similar to that of the base game. You collect platinum to buy abilities and upgrades on the spear, and kill leader demons to improve your stats. However, once you complete the main story, you get a master key that unlocks a bunch of new areas and challenges. You can go back to already completed levels, and they will have a new flow to them. Some of the arenas will be repopulated with a completely new encounter, but for the most part, they're in the state you left them in. Inside of these newly unlocked endgame zones, there are arenas and secrets, along with 3 unique challenges for each level. One of these is a rune trial thing, and yes, I know these are not rune trials, but I don't remember what each of these types of challenges are called, and I'm not going to check because they even look like the rune trial stones, so get off my back, okay? 2 of them require you to path around an open zone and clear a bunch of small encounters, and 2 of them are just regular arenas requiring you to kill a number of demons. If you beat the time, you get your rewards. Another flavor is the classic encounters, which take you to a Doom 2 level, expecting you to complete them. While a neat touch, they end up playing like shit. The shotgun you get is comparatively weaker than the original, while also being the only weapon you're allowed to use, and the enemies still use their normal Dark Ages attacks, making for some unfair fights. They even tried recreating the floaty movement from 1993, but it just feels awful, and the modern lighting technology is incongruent with the old art style. The final challenges are just these simple arenas that are much tougher than anything else in this game, though they are where I finally started properly enjoying the new combat flow. Your rewards for all of these are special currencies that let you get the final tier of upgrades and finally let you fight a different final boss, Zalgoroth. The fight is fun and demanding, but it does not feel climactic, for the fact this is not a character in the story, it's just a special big pain elemental. Overall, I enjoy this new take on progression, and I like the reason it gives you to replay levels in a new way, but I would have made the classic encounters proper secrets with no rewards, and the ending is, as I've come to expect from Modern Doom, disappointing. Even more so, given that your endgame upgrades can only be used for whatever remainder of the endgame you've got left to do, and are only truly kitted out for the boss, and you cannot properly replay the levels from scratch with your current gear, something that has been possible in every game since Doom 4. Okay, I think that's about all I had to say about Revelations itself. However, I cannot ignore the elephant in the room. There's reports that, just before the DLC released, up to half of id Software, or more, depending on the article, were sacked. This is a travesty, and I cannot feel any different than as if it was an offense to gaming as a whole. The present personnel has produced some of the most fun, influential and popular games of the past decade, and yet a bunch of corporate suits decided that wasn't what they wanted. While few of the original team remain, this incident undermines their legacy too, of industry-defining technology and inventing the entire fucking first-person shooter genre as we know today. Hearing this news left me extremely conflicted about buying this DLC. On one hand, I felt like I had to protest against this practice, but on the other I knew that insufficient revenue is what caused the layoffs in the first place. I'm sure this isn't the last good game id will make, but the fact I'm even worrying about this possibility just should not be happening. It makes me think of how Spa has gone on a bi-yearly rotation on the Formula 1 calendar. Spa should be on the calendar every year until the Earth explodes, and the fact someone up there even had the thought it shouldn't be, let alone actually went through with it, is disconcerting to say the least. Similarly, id Software should be a permanent fixture in the gaming landscape, alongside Valve, FromSoft, Firaxis, and Arcane. Oh wait. Right. I do believe I've overstayed my welcome by now. Revelation's good, Revelation's also bad. I have a feeling that on a repeat playthrough, I will enjoy it far more. If you like Modern Doom as a whole, I believe you will not be disappointed. Eventually, the barriers to entry are potentially the steepest they've been in the series, and that does reflect on some flaws. But when the combat gets there, it rivals the previous games, something I could not have said about the Dark Ages originally. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I hope you liked the video. If you do, I would really appreciate if you hit like and subscribe. I want to get monetized, which would help me spend more time and effort making these videos. So if you want to see that, you know what to do. Thank you, bye bye.